The situation escalated quickly. As I stood there, showing them my FBI badge, the group of fake HOA officers clearly started to lose their confident demeanor. The leader of the group, who had been the most vocal up until that point, seemed to flinch, his eyes darting nervously as he tried to come up with some kind of response. He stammered a few words, trying to explain his supposed authority, but his words lacked conviction. "Look," he started, his voice shaky, "we're just here to enforce the rules of the community." "We're within our rights," I cut him off. "You're not within your rights. You have no legitimate power here, and you have no legal right to be making demands of me. You're not even part of the HOA." I was getting frustrated, but I had to stay calm. I could tell they were trying to keep control of the situation, but it was clear to me they were improvising. They tried to pressure me by speaking louder, making vague threats, but none of it felt real. This was nothing more than a scam. I wasn't about to fall for it. I knew the law, and I knew how these kinds of schemes worked. They were counting on me being intimidated into paying them or complying with their supposed authority. But what they didn't count on was that I knew exactly what they were up to. At this point, I could see they were running out of ideas. They started to fumble around with their fake badges, trying to look official, but the whole thing was falling apart. The leader, who appeared to be their ringleader, began to get visibly upset. He took a step forward, trying to assert himself once more, but I could sense the desperation in his voice. "Listen, you don't understand," he said, his eyes widening. "We're just doing our job here, and if you don't comply, doing your job?" I interrupted. "Your job is illegal. What you're doing here is a crime. You can't just walk into someone's home and make up rules to intimidate them into paying fines for things that don't even exist." The more I pressed, the more flustered they became. Their confidence had completely dissolved, and they were now trying to come up with half-baked excuses to justify their presence. It was clear they were pretending to have power, hoping I'd go along with it without questioning them. But I wasn't buying it. I pulled out my phone and began recording the interaction. "You're not going anywhere until I get a hold of the real authorities. I'm calling the police right now. You're impersonating law enforcement, and that's a crime. You're going to be held accountable." The moment I said that, I could see the panic start to set in. The group, which had been trying to act so tough moments ago, now seemed like they were desperately trying to figure out how to escape without getting into deeper trouble. I made the call to the local police, giving them a clear rundown of the situation. I explained that I was an FBI agent and that these individuals were attempting to impersonate HOA officers in order to scam me into paying fines for non-existent violations. The dispatcher on the other end of the line responded quickly and told me they would send officers to my address right away. As I hung up, the group began to look even more uncomfortable. The leader of the group tried to make one final attempt to intimidate me, saying something about facing the consequences, but by now his words were weak and his body language screamed uncertainty. He glanced at his companions, who were equally nervous, and it became clear they had no backup plan if the real authorities showed up. It didn't take long before the police arrived. The officers were immediately able to identify that the group had no legitimate authority. As they began questioning the fake HOA officers, their lies began to unravel. The fake badges they had were poorly made and didn't match the official HOA insignia. They had no real identification, no paperwork to back up their claims, and no reason to be on my property. They were just con artists trying to exploit people who didn't know any better. By the time the local police had gotten there, it was over for the fake officers. The police arrested them on charges of impersonating law enforcement, which is a felony in many states. They were caught red-handed, and the scam they were running was exposed for what it truly was. I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just about stopping them from scamming me, it was about making sure they didn't get away with this crime in my neighborhood or anywhere else. I was able to protect my rights, and more importantly, I helped stop these people from causing harm to others. This experience reminded me that even in the most seemingly harmless situations, there can be hidden dangers, and you have to trust your instincts. As the police took the suspects away, I reflected on how close they had come to getting away with it. It was a harsh reminder that scams and fraudulent activities can happen at any time. But as long as you stand up for yourself and stay alert, you can protect yourself from falling victim to such schemes. The whole ordeal had been surreal. I never expected my morning to take such a wild turn, but in the end, the right thing was done. I was able to put a stop to their operation and hopefully prevent anyone else from becoming a victim. And for anyone else dealing with a similar situation, just remember, trust your gut, question authority when it doesn't feel right, and never hesitate to stand up for yourself. You never know when it might save you from a dangerous scam. As the fake HOA officers started to become visibly uncomfortable, their earlier confidence quickly eroded. They were no longer trying to intimidate or push me into submission. Instead, they started to make excuses, stammering and avoiding eye contact. I could see the nervousness written all over their faces as they realized that they were losing control of the situation. They had been exposed and there was nowhere left for them to hide. I kept pressing them, asking more pointed questions about their identities and the legitimacy of their claim to authority. Who sent you? Who's your superior? Where's your official paperwork? I demanded, giving them no room to wiggle. Every question seemed to hit them harder than the last, and they were unable to provide any coherent answers. Their story kept changing, and I could tell they were grasping at straws. Then one of them, trying to save face, blurted out, "We're just here to enforce the rules of the HOA. We're just doing our job." But this was the moment I realized what was really going on. It wasn't an arrest they were after. It was a scam. They didn't have any real power. They were attempting to intimidate me into paying a fine or complying with fake rules they had invented. They were counting on people not questioning their authority, on people just following their lead without digging deeper. I wasn't about to fall for it. It was clear now that I wasn't just dealing with some harmless misunderstanding. These people were out to manipulate residents and exploit them for their own gain. That's when the adrenaline kicked in. As an FBI agent, my training taught me to stay calm and take control of the situation, especially when confronted with deceit or illegal activity. These individuals were impersonating authority, and that was something I couldn't let slide. I pulled out my phone, not just for documentation, but to make sure they knew I was serious about reporting this to the real authorities. I called the local police and explained the situation, that I was an FBI agent, and I was facing a group of people who were impersonating HOA officers. I told them I needed someone to come out immediately, as this was not only an illegal act, but could lead to further scams if left unchecked. The dispatcher assured me that officers would be on their way right away. The fake officers' faces fell when they realized I was making that call. The leader of the group began to stumble over his words, desperately trying to salvage the situation. "You don't need to involve the police," he said, but his voice was weak, and it was clear he was trying to backpedal now that he knew he was in over his head. "We can work this out without anyone else knowing," he continued, but it was too late. I wasn't going to let them off the hook that easily. Minutes later, the sound of sirens in the distance made the tension palpable. The fake officers were trying to make one last-ditch attempt to look innocent, but it was clear that they were cornered. When the real police arrived, the entire dynamic shifted. The officers quickly took control, assessing the situation and questioning the imposters. Within moments, the truth came out. The fake HOA officers had no real connection to the neighborhood or the community. They were simply con artists trying to pull off a scam. The badges they wore were laughably fake, and their official papers were nothing more than poorly printed documents. They had been making the rounds in different neighborhoods, hoping to prey on unsuspecting residents, threatening them with fake fines and imaginary violations. They figured that if they acted like they had authority, no one would question them, and they had been getting away with it until today. The police quickly arrested them on charges of impersonating law enforcement, a crime that carries serious legal consequences. It was satisfying to see them handcuffed and led away in custody, knowing that I had helped prevent them from scamming more innocent people. What I thought would be a typical morning had turned into a full-blown criminal operation being taken down. After the whole ordeal, I was left with a mix of disbelief and relief. It had been such a surreal experience, but at the same time it reaffirmed my belief in the importance of questioning authority and trusting your instincts. Had I just gone along with what they were saying, I could have easily been manipulated. But instead, I took action, and it paid off. What struck me the most was how easy it was for these scammers to take advantage of people. They counted on residents being intimidated by the supposed authority they wielded, assuming that no one would ever challenge them. It's a stark reminder of how important it is to be vigilant in every situation, especially when something feels off. In the end, I was proud of myself for handling the situation the way I did. Not only did I protect myself, but I also helped expose a dangerous scam that could have affected many others. The experience was a powerful reminder. Don't let anyone intimidate you, no matter who they claim to be. And if something doesn't feel right, always question it. You just never know who might be trying to pull a fast one on you, or who might be standing right behind them to stop it. So the next time someone shows up at your door, no matter how official they seem, take a moment to pause. Trust your gut, stay calm, and always stand your ground. You might just be the one who stops a scam before it even gets started.